The fake HOA fined him for his uniform. He was a decorated black police captain. March 1. The letter. It was just past 7 a.m. when Captain Malcolm Reeves, dressed in his crisp, dark blue uniform, stepped out onto his driveway to retrieve the morning paper. The rising sun reflected off the silver trim of his badge, the same badge that had earned him commendations, respect, and bullet wounds. His hands, once trembling from years of duty, had steadied in the peace of his quiet, suburban neighborhood of Crestwood Heights. Or so he thought. The white envelope sticking out of his mailbox looked official, but it wasn't from the city. No seal, just cheap ink and a stamped return address that read, Crestwood Heights Neighborhood Standards Committee, formerly Crestwood HOA, dissolved 2016. He furrowed his brow. The HOA had been shut down years ago after a major embezzlement scandal, yet somehow the same group of self-important residents had rebranded as a committee. They claimed to uphold the spirit of the community. He opened the envelope. Notice of violation. You have been observed in violation of neighborhood visual standards by wearing law enforcement attire in public areas. Uniforms of any kind, military, law enforcement, or first responder, are not permitted in driveways, visible lawns, or front-facing porches as per Crestwood Neighborhood Image Guidelines. Unratified but active in spirit. You are hereby fined $150. Continued violations may lead to legal action or community removal. Crestwood Heights Neighborhood Standards Committee, signed in large looping cursive, Karen Whitmore. Chairwoman Malcolm blinked. Community removal, he muttered, looking down at his uniform, still damp from the morning dew. His badge glinted in the sun like it had hundreds of times on duty. His blood simmered, but he'd learned long ago not to act out of anger. So instead he laughed, a cold, disbelieving laugh. He took a photo of the letter and texted it to his wife, Natalie. Malcolm, you won't believe this crap. Natalie, Karen? Again? What did she do now? Malcolm, she just fined me $150 for wearing my police uniform on my own driveway. Part 2. Meet Karen. Karen Whitmore, 49, had mastered the art of self-importance. Her ash blonde hair, shellacked into place each morning, was her armor. Her floral blouses screamed, approachable, while her tone of voice shouted the opposite. She considered herself the final line of defense between the neighborhood and chaos, a term she often used when referring to anything she didn't understand or like. She'd never liked Malcolm. From the moment he and his family moved in 6 years ago, she'd bristled at the thought of a black man in uniform next door. It wasn't that she was racist, she often insisted. She just cared about aesthetics. He's too visible, she had once whispered to her neighbor during a garden club brunch. This neighborhood is supposed to be calm, not intimidating. Karen had spearheaded the resurrection of the HOA under a new name after its fall from grace. She and her friends met weekly in her oversized living room, sipping lemon tea and rewriting fake bylaws with bold fonts and legal jargon plucked from Google. To her, power was intoxicating. It didn't matter if it was real. Part 3. The Incident. 2 days after receiving the notice, Malcolm decided to test the limits of Karen's nonsense. He walked out to his driveway in full uniform, hat, badge, duty belt, and calmly began washing his patrol SUV. Karen was on her porch with binoculars and her phone, already dialing 911. The call was brief. 911 dispatcher. What's the emergency, ma'am? Karen, hissing. There's a man in uniform acting aggressively. It's not appropriate for our neighborhood. Dispatcher. Is he armed? Karen. Yes. He has a gun on his hip. Dispatcher. Ma'am, is this Captain Malcolm Reeves by any chance? Karen. I don't know. He's just standing there, intimidating people. By the time 2 squad cars rolled up, Malcolm was already waving, laughing with the officers, his colleagues. Karen came storming down the driveway, face red, voice shrill. What gives you the right to make this a war zone? She snapped. One of the officers, a young Latina named Officer Castillo, frowned. Ma'am, this man is our precinct captain. Karen froze. He's not just a cop, she whispered, eyes widening. He's the captain? Malcolm stepped forward, calm and collected. Is there a problem with me washing my patrol vehicle in front of my home? Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Yes, she said defiantly. It disrupts the look of our community. The crowd had started to gather. Neighbors peered out windows. Some filmed. Others shook their heads. Part 4. The Internet Storms. In later that evening, a video went viral. Title, Fake HOA, Karen calls 911 on decorated police captain, immediately regrets it. Within 12 hours, it had over 3 million views. Comments poured in. He's justice for all. She really thought she could intimidate a police captain out of his own driveway. Wow. Mom, 3. This is exactly why people say HOAs are out of control. Let the man do his job. We're safe for a true blue vet. Captain Reeves, thank you for your service. You're a class act. News outlets picked up the story. Karen's name, face, and signature were all over the web. Reporters camped outside her home. Her once proud garden club was now dissolved. The mayor called Malcolm personally to apologize. And the Real Legal HOA Council issued a statement confirming the Crestwood Heights HOA has no legal authority. All documents are null. Fines are void. Karen Whitmore has no jurisdiction. Karen resigned from her fake committee the next day. Part 2. The Unraveling. 1. The storm at her door. The knock on Karen's door came just after sunrise. It was not police. It was worse, in her mind anyway. Reporters. They stood on her front porch with cameras and microphones, their faces expectant, their questions sharp. Miss Whitmore, do you have a comment about the viral video? Did you know Captain Reeves was a decorated police officer before you filed the complaint? Is it true your HOA isn't legally recognized? Karen slammed the door in their faces. But it was too late. Her face, flushed with anger and arrogance, had already made it into the next clip. Her voice screeching about community standards became the latest meme, spliced over images of police officers rescuing civilians, veterans saluting the flag, and Captain Reeves calmly hosing off his SUV like the unbothered icon he was. By mid-morning, someone had uncovered her old blog posts, now deleted, where she criticized neighborhood diversity and made subtle digs at urban aesthetics. Screenshots were shared like wildfire. And then the real blow landed. An email from the Crestwood City Council. Dear Ms. Whitmore, due to recent events and public concerns, we are formally requesting your resignation from any and all positions associated with Crestwood Heights representation, formal or informal. Additionally, we have received multiple resident complaints regarding harassment and racial profiling under your committee's leadership. A review board will be convened to determine any further action. Karen sat at her kitchen table in silence. Her lemon tea sat untouched. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from her garden club, her realtor, even her pastor. No one wanted to be seen with her now. 2. Natalie speaks. Meanwhile, Malcolm's wife, Natalie Reeves, had always been the quiet pillar behind her husband's strength. A school principal with a no-nonsense attitude and an elegant, razor-sharp intellect, she had kept silent through years of Karen's passive-aggressive behavior. But this time, she spoke up. In a heartfelt open letter on Facebook titled, "When you shame a uniform, you shame a legacy," Natalie wrote, "My husband wears his uniform because it's who he is, not just what he does. That badge comes with memories you will never understand. Partners lost, children saved, wounds both visible and invisible. When Karen Whitmore fined him for wearing it, she didn't just insult Malcolm. She insulted every man and woman who risked their lives in silence and dignity." The post went viral. By the end of the day, she was invited to speak at a community town hall, televised locally. She walked up to the mic in a navy blue dress, her posture calm, her tone measured. "We moved to Crestwood for peace. Not privilege, not approval, just peace. But peace only exists when prejudice is quieted. I invite everyone here, especially those who stayed silent during Karen's years of intimidation, to speak now. Stand up, not just for Malcolm, but for every person judged before they're known." The applause thundered through the hall. Even the mayor stood. 3. The letter from a veteran. 3 days after the town hall, Malcolm received a handwritten letter in the mail. "Dear Captain Reeves, I'm a retired Marine. I live 3 streets over. I've kept quiet for too long. I remember the day my own daughter cried after Karen told her she didn't look like someone who belonged here. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us who've been silently disrespected in the name of neighborhood standards. Thank you for your service. And thank you for reminding people what real leadership looks like. Semper Fi, Dan Harris." The envelope had no return address, but Malcolm held on to it like a medal. He tucked it into his coat pocket the next day when he received an unexpected invitation. "You are cordially invited to speak at the upcoming Crestwood Police Community Forum as a special guest of honor. Your actions have sparked conversations across the county, and we would be proud to have you share your thoughts on community unity and leadership." Malcolm said yes, but he had one condition. Karen had to be invited too. 4. Karen faces the crowd. Karen almost didn't come. For 2 weeks, she lived like a ghost. Shades drawn, groceries delivered, calls ignored. Her children had stopped answering her texts. Even her dog groomer had canceled on her. But when she received the official envelope, "You are invited to listen and participate in the community reconciliation forum," something inside her shifted. She showed up. She wore a simple beige sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back. She looked smaller. When Malcolm took the stage, the room went silent. "I stand here not just as a police officer," he began, "but as a father, a neighbor, and a man who once believed this community had no room for someone like me. But over the past weeks, I've seen that change. Not because people were forced, but because truth made silence impossible." Then he turned to Karen. "I don't need an apology from her. I just hope she sees me now, not the uniform. Me." Karen stood up, and for the first time, she spoke with no edge in her voice. "I judged him before I knew him. I thought I was protecting our image. But I forgot that image means nothing if it hides injustice. I was wrong." A long pause, then applause. Slow, then louder. And for the first time, Karen cried. Not from embarrassment, but from the weight of something finally breaking open inside her. Part 3. The climax. When silence is no longer an option. 1. The fire that brought the truth. The fire broke out just after midnight. A transformer exploded on Oak Ridge Lane. Within minutes, a blaze had spread across 3 yards. Sparks flew like angry wasps, igniting dried leaves and hedges. By the time residents called 911, the flames had already jumped fences. Malcolm was home, still half awake from late paperwork, when he heard the sirens. Then the scanner in his office crackled. Multiple houses affected. Crestwood Heights. Code red response. Without hesitation, he threw on his gear, boots, jacket, badge, and raced outside. Smoke filled the air. People were running from their homes in pajamas and slippers. Families huddled on the sidewalks. One man screamed that his wife was trapped in the back bedroom. Without backup, Malcolm rushed into the house alone. Inside, the heat was choking. He crawled low, using his jacket to shield his face. He found the woman unconscious, her legs pinned under a collapsed bookcase. He lifted, screamed, gritted his teeth, and heaved with everything he had. And then, a neighbor helped. Another joined. They carried her out as flames engulfed the ceiling. She lived. 2. The camera in the tree. What Malcolm didn't know was that one of the neighbors had a ring-style camera mounted high in a tree, hidden by branches. The footage, uploaded to social media the next morning, showed everything. A uniformed man, black, strong, determined, running headfirst into the smoke. Neighbors shouting. Someone yelling, "Reeves, no! Wait for backup!" Flames rising. And then, Malcolm emerging, carrying the woman over his shoulder like a soldier in war. It was cinematic, raw, heroic. The clip hit 5 million views in 8 hours. Local news called him the fire captain without the helmet. National news picked it up. Headlines read, "He was fined for his uniform. Then he ran into fire to save their lives, from targeted to hero." The Crestwood Heights redemption. The man Karen called disruptive is now the face of bravery. 3. The woman he saved. Her name was Delilah Borden, 74, retired art professor, and ironically a former critic of too much uniform presence in suburban neighborhoods. She had once sided with Karen on several committee votes. When she awoke in the hospital, her first words were, "Is the officer okay? The one who saved me?" Malcolm visited her later that day. She burst into tears upon seeing him. I judged you like Karen did, but you didn't hesitate. You didn't stop to ask who I voted for or how I felt about your badge. You just saved me." He took her hand. "That's what we do." Delilah went public with her story. She joined Natalie and others at a live town hall interview. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "This man saved my life, and before that, I treated his presence as a threat. I was wrong, dead wrong, and if I can admit that, maybe so can the rest of you." 4. Karen's final test. Karen watched the footage over and over again in her living room. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She hadn't spoken to Malcolm since the forum, but now after the fire, she walked across the street. No clipboard, no notes, just her. Malcolm was standing in his yard watering the flowers. He looked up. "Karen," she paused. "I don't deserve to ask anything of you," she said, "but I wanted to say I saw what you did, and I've spent a lot of years thinking I was helping this community, but maybe I was just protecting myself." Malcolm nodded once. You still can help. Just listen more. Judge less. Karen looked at her own hands, still trembling. Do you think people can really change? Malcolm smiled gently. I used to think change only happened after punishment. Now I think it happens after truth. 5 of the statue. 2 months later, the city council made an announcement. A local artist had sculpted a bronze statue of Captain Malcolm Reeves, crouched down, hand outstretched, not holding a weapon, but reaching to lift someone. The plaque read, "To those who serve with courage, even when facing prejudice. To those who protect, even when uninvited. To those who rise above." The statue was placed at the entrance to Crestwood Heights. At the unveiling, the entire community came. People held candles. Veterans saluted. Children clapped. Malcolm didn't give a speech. He just stood silently beside his wife, hand over his heart. Karen, standing near the back of the crowd, wept quietly. This time not from shame, but from the undeniable force of truth and growth. Part 4. The Reckoning and Rebuilding. 1. A school visit and a teachable moment. 2 weeks after the statue unveiling, Captain Malcolm Reeves stood before a group of 8th graders in a local middle school auditorium. Rows of curious eyes looked up at him as he stepped to the podium. He wore his uniform, clean, pressed, proud. Behind him, the school had hung a banner that read, "Community Hero Series, Learning from the People Who Protect Us." He glanced down at a small girl in the front row who looked like she had something urgent to ask. He smiled gently. "You in the front, go ahead." The girl stood nervously. "Captain Reeves, why did that lady try to punish you for being a police officer?" Silence fell. Malcolm took a breath, then crouched to her level. "Sometimes, sweetie, people fear what they don't understand, or they believe that certain uniforms belong only to certain kinds of people. But the truth is, there is no color for courage, and there's no uniform that makes you better than anyone else, only the actions behind it." The room erupted in applause, but it was the girl's smile, wide and proud, that stayed with him. 2. Karen in therapy. Karen Whitmore sat in a therapist's office for the first time in her life. The walls were pale green. There was a small fountain in the corner. Soft music played, trying its best to calm her frayed nerves. She hadn't come because of the backlash. She hadn't come because of the town meetings, the resignations, or even the shame. She'd come because she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself screaming at a man in uniform, while he was trying to protect the community she claimed to love. "I used to think I was helping," she said, staring at her hands. "Keeping things orderly, safe." The therapist nodded. "And now?" Karen swallowed. "Now I realize I was just keeping things familiar, comfortable for me, not necessarily right." There was a long silence. Then the therapist said, "Growth is uncomfortable, but it's not impossible." Karen blinked away tears. For the first time, the words didn't sound like blame. They sounded like a path forward. 3. The community dinner that summer. Malcolm and Natalie hosted a block-wide community dinner. Long tables lined the street, covered in homemade dishes. Families brought folding chairs, and kids played tag between parked cars. The once divided neighborhood now buzzed with laughter and music. At one end of the street, a small stage had been set up. A banner fluttered above, "Crestwood United, a new chapter." Malcolm didn't plan on giving a speech, but people started chanting his name. He raised a hand modestly, stepped up, and said, "This dinner isn't about me. It's about all of us. Because real change doesn't happen when one person does something brave. It happens when a whole community decides it's time to be better." Then he turned to the crowd and said simply, "Let's keep choosing better." Karen was there. She hadn't known if she'd be welcome, but Natalie had personally invited her. And when Karen approached the table with her famous lemon meringue pie, several neighbors greeted her, not with hugs, but with eye contact. Nods. A chance. She set the pie down beside a dish made by a black couple she once tried to report for too many guests. The wife looked at Karen for a moment, then smiled and said, "You know what? That pie's legendary. Let's see if it still is." And they laughed. 4. The letter to the future. Months later, as part of a time capsule project at the local school, students were asked to write a letter about what they hoped the world would be like in 20 years. One student named Darrell wrote, "I hope when people wear a uniform, we don't judge them for the color of their skin underneath it. I hope people like Captain Reeves don't have to be heroes just to be treated like humans. And I hope when someone messes up, they get a second chance, if they're really sorry, because people can change. I've seen it happen on my own street." The letter was sealed inside the capsule, right next to a laminated copy of the original HOA fine. The contrast was intentional. 5. A final walk. One evening, Malcolm and Natalie walked hand in hand around the neighborhood as the sun dipped low. Children waved at him. A teenager called out, "Hey, Cap, my mom said I could ride with you for the police mentorship program." He gave a thumbs up. Across the street, Karen watered her garden. She glanced up, nervous. Natalie gave her a small wave. Karen waved back. And Malcolm? He just smiled. Not in bitterness, not in pride, but in peace. Because in this small corner of the world, the fight for dignity and truth had not only been won, it had made room for healing. The end.